Welcome to VLGA Connect. My name is Catherine Arndt and I'm the Chief of the VLGA Connect studio. I hope you enjoy today's Connect episode brought to you by the VLGA, the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hello, everyone. It is that time of the week when we talk all things local government and governance here on the Governance Update from VLGA Connect, which is brought to you by our terrific sponsors, Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And as you might be aware, we are having some guest hosts join us for the foreseeable future while Steve Cooper takes a break. And Julie Reid is joining me, which I'm really excited about this week. Julie, hello and welcome to the Governance Update.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning. What a glorious day it is. And finally, we've got some summer coming.
Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. It's still not what you'd call very summery weather, but it's looking more promising, isn't it?
It is, yeah. No, It's looking up. Thank you.
So, Julie, before we get into the news of the week, perhaps for people who aren't that familiar with you and what you've done, you're a former Executive Director of Local Government Victoria and a former Council CEO, been around the sector for a long time. I worked with you when you were on the board of LG Pro, and I was the interim CEO there for a while, so we've had quite a few dealings over the years. What are you doing these days?
Well, Chris, I took the move to set up my own business, Julie Reid and Associates, and I've been working for local government since June this year, and it's been a fantastic journey. It's great doing a variety of work for local government, some of those wicked problems that we face in local government, some of the challenges and some great opportunities. So at the moment, I'm doing some work for Frankston, for Swan Hill and for Maribyrnong. So a nice variety of councils to work with.
Good spread. And what sort of things, what sort of tasks are you looking to be doing or actually doing?
Yeah, well, I've also got some mentoring and coaching that I'm doing on the side as well. So I'm mentoring, coaching, helping in particular women progress their careers in local government. So that's been really a fantastic opportunity for me to be able to connect with some really, really talented women. But I'm also working on some governance issues for councils, looking at some structures for councils. And also with my planning background, I've been asked to look at doing some planning related work, which is more high level visioning for the council or high level advocacy type work for the council. So look, it's fantastic. It's taking me in lots of different directions.
So I've been there where you are, and it really does broaden your horizons and open up all these opportunities. And if you're anything like me, that opportunity to bring the perspective that you've built up over a long time working in the sector, like in councils, to help councils navigate, as you say, some of those wicked problems, it's a real opportunity, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, it's really important for me to connect regularly with the sector if I want to remain current as a consultant. And so to work closely with the sector all the time just keeps me up to date with what the challenges are that the sector's facing. And so with that, I can then forecast, well, what kind of things are going to be needed into the future. I've already seen some gaps that might need to be filled over the next couple of years, particularly maybe after the next council election.
Yeah, which, as we know, is less than 2 years away. But there's, if we can perhaps get into the news of the week, there's going to be a host of countbacks or by-elections in the coming months because quite a few sitting councillors have been successful in getting elected at the state election, Julie.
I know. I don't know whether I feel sad about that, losing our councillors to the state government. Maybe in some ways I feel a little bit sad about that, particularly some of those great councillors that we really do value having at the table. So I've been watching it with a bit of interest. I've been interested in watching what's going on down at Mornington Peninsula, Chris.
So the seat of Hastings with Paul Mercurio, they're looking like he might get in.
Yeah, it's close. It's a close call, that one. I'm not too sure which way it's going to go, but it's looking like he's just running ahead at the moment based on the two-party preferred vote. Yeah,
I think the ABC had him this morning about 600 votes or thereabouts in front, which is a slight increase on what they were saying last week. But some of these, and some that we'll talk about, are clearly going to come down to that final preference count to be definitive. But They've got that seat still as one of the 6 seats as we speak left in doubt. So we watch it very closely.
We will.
What do you think about an actor, a dancer with some local government experience getting into state parliament? Is that a good thing for local government to have someone of that background, do you think?
Oh, look, I don't think it hurts, really. I mean, I think that state parliament should have all sorts of people in it, and all sorts of backgrounds. And I think it brings a representation that's maybe different to what else is in there. So bring it on. That's what I say.
So what is now clear is that we do have at least 3 definite councillors elected to the lower house. Kim O'Keefe, the former mayor of Greater Shepparton, 4-term mayor, long-term councillor, has been elected for the Nationals in the seat of Shepparton. I did quietly predict that she'd do very well. I'm very pleased to see that prediction come true. Jade Benham, who is a recent mayor at Swan Hill, current councillor, has been elected again for the Nats in the seat of Mildura. And Gabrielle de Vietri has taken the seat of Richmond from the ALP on behalf of the Greens, which was a widely predicted result, but interesting to see it actually come to fruition on the weekend, Julie.
Yes, it is. And good on Gabrielle. I think, fantastic. She's worked obviously really hard for it, and she's got the results.
Now, are you looking at what's happening in Preston? Because that's been one of the surprise packets of the election.
Yes. That is really interesting. And I think, isn't it still in the hunt, that one?
Yeah, it is, yes. It's still one of the 6 in doubt. So independent candidate and current Darebin councillor, and again, another long-term councillor, and I think a former mayor, I think I'm right in saying, in Gaetano Greco, has polled very strongly to get into, I think, second position. They believe he'll finish second, and therefore it'll come down to the preferences. Still in the hunt, although it does look like the ALP candidate is just pulling ahead. But there's a big proviso on that one because they don't really know how those preferences are going to flow until they do the final count.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Well, it is because it seems like not many people saw that one coming, and even over the weekend with the early reports, there wasn't a lot said about it until they realised, I think, earlier in the week that there's a story brewing here. So we'll keep an eye on that one. I did want to send out a shout out. I'm pretty sure she wouldn't watch the program, but a former councillor that I used to work with, Luba Grigorovich, former deputy mayor at Hobsons Bay City Council, was elected to the seat of Cororoit. That's the seat that Marlene Carews held. So congratulations to Luba. She's in the parliament now.
Fantastic. That's really good news.
And the upper house is really interesting, Julie. Again, so there's, of those we've listed, I think there's 5 potential current councillors that could trigger by-elections or countbacks, depending on the council they come from. There's potentially 5 in the upper house as well. One that looks certain is Moira Deeming from Melton, being elected to the Western Metropolitan region on behalf of the Liberal Party. Likely looks to be Catherine Copsey, who's a Port Phillip councillor, another one from the part of the world where you spent a bit of time there down at Kingston, Julie, looking likely for Southern Metro. Trung Lu of Brimbank is possible for Western Metro. So down in, I think, the 5th position at the moment. This counting takes a long time for the upper house, and we won't be, I think the 13th of December, I read, I think is the definitive date where we'll know the final result. Colac Otway councillor Joe McCracken looks likely in Western Victoria. And Sarah Mansfield at Greater Geelong must be on tenterhooks because she's been jumping in and out of that 5th position in Western Victoria. And as of this morning on the estimates, I think 72% of the vote counted. She's out of that 5th position in 6th. But we watched that one very closely too.
Yeah, it must be so nerve-wracking for them in that circumstance. They've worked so hard and they just don't know whether they're going to get across the line. So
yes,
you've got to feel for them during this time. It must be pretty stressful.
The vagaries of that voting system, I don't profess to understand it. I think you've just got to sit back and wait for it to run its course and trust in the result. Hey,
I know, and it's overwhelming even when you go to the poll. When you go to do your voting. Yeah. When you've worked in the system for a long time, you still look at it and go, wow. Yeah. Imagine if you don't know or understand the system, how hard it is to understand just the voting process itself.
Yeah, very, very true. In terms of local government ministers, our most recent ones, so Sean Lean very safely returned in the upper house. Melissa Horn, the most recent local government minister, and of course we're waiting to see who will have the portfolio post the election, safely returned in Williamstown. Her main competition there was a Hobsons Bay councillor, Daria Callender, but she won the seat pretty handily with a big margin. And Adam Somyurek looks like he may be back into the upper house. He's in one of those flip-flopping positions at fifth with Fiona Patten from the Reason Party. So we won't know that one definitively for a while yet, but it's looking with a little bit more confidence that Adam Somyurek may be back.
Yes, and look, what have you heard, Chris, about when the Premier's going to announce the new lineup?
I've heard very little. I was going to ask you that question. They're probably waiting, obviously, to definitively know who's going to be in the Parliament. Do you reckon someone like Paul Mercurio with a bit of councillor experience would be a candidate to have the local government portfolio straight up, or is it a need for more experience, do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I'm not 100% sure about which way that will go. Certainly, I think he could be in the running. But yeah, no, look, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to guess that one.
We should start a book and see what people think, and perhaps they can tell us in the comments on the socials. I know a lot of people would love to have Sean Lean back. He was really highly respected and well regarded in the sector as a minister. I'm not casting any aspersions on Melissa Horn. She was only in the role for a couple of months. I think people would be quite happy if Melissa was to continue in the portfolio as well. But we know it's all up in the air and needs to land, and there's a lot of machinations that happen behind the scenes, which you probably know more about than I do, having worked on that side.
It was great. It was great working with Sean Lean. He was really connected to the sector, really interested in the sector. It's unfortunately I didn't get to work with Melissa Horn, but I've heard really good things about her as well. Yeah. So look, let's just hope that a good minister is selected and someone that's really passionate about the sector.
That's all we can hope for, isn't it? So fingers crossed, and hopefully it won't be too long before we start to get some intelligence on that. Let's talk about mayoral election results. We're getting towards the end, Julie. There's only 3 to go now, and the ones that have happened this week since our last episode were Yarra, Marybeck and Wangaratta. Not sure if you're across any of these or know any of these councillors, Julie. Do you?
No, they're all new to me. So it'll be interesting to see how they progress in their careers as mayors.
Yeah, so an interesting one is Claudia Nguyen, who's been elected to the mayoralty at Yarra. Claudia is an independent councillor and has been hailed as someone who's part of the new brigade, bringing new perspectives as a young queer woman of colour in the mayoralty at Yarra. Edward Crossland re-elected as the deputy mayor. The city of Marybeck, formerly Moreland, has gone with a new mayor as well, and the youngest ever mayor for that council in Angelica Panopoulos, who was elected this week.
She's younger than Councillor Ben Ramcharan up at Nillumbik.
Good question. I don't know.
He's 26.
He is 26, and I'm not sure.
He's the youngest so far this time around.
Yeah. Last year, of course, we had Maribyrnong and Brimbank with young mayors, younger than that, I think. So, yes, we've got Ben at Nillumbik, and I'm not sure how old Angelica Panopoulos is, and it's probably not polite to ask, Julie.
No, we won't ask. We won't ask. But, really interesting that there's a trend of young mayors coming out of local government, which is fantastic to see a diversity.
Well, it's more representative of the community, isn't it? Yeah, it is great to see that spread. And we'll talk about the gender balance in just a second. I did want to make a mention of Dean Rees at Wangaratta Rural City Council. I've had the fortune to do a bit of work with Wangaratta over the years. He's been re-elected to the mayoralty unopposed for a 5th term. He's actually, I understand from the media reports, declared that he would like to go for a 6th term next year and then hang up his boots and step down from council, which would be a great contribution and a great achievement if he's able to do that. He's been a very effective mayor in the rural city of Wangaratta, so congratulations to Councillor Rees.
Yeah, and you don't see that very often, do you, Chris? So it's pretty amazing to see someone land in that role for such a long time. So well done to him.
So in terms of the gender balance, I've done some quick calculations. Someone might correct me if I've got any of this wrong. But
please tell me it's a 50-50 split, Chris.
No, I'm sorry. I can't tell you it's a 50-50 split, but I can tell you that I think we're getting closer. I can't recall what last year's ratio was, but by my calculations, we're at about 56-44 currently with, that's male to female ratio, of course, with 3 to come. So I don't believe on numbers we can get to 50-50. We might get to 54-46 or even 53-47 potentially, but that would require Latrobe, Boroondara and Wodonga all to elect women mayors, and we'll wait and see. All of those councils have deferred their elections for various reasons. One's got a countback coming. Another had candidates running for the election, and I know Boroondara set a date of the 8th of December. Not sure of the date yet for Latrobe, and Wodonga's talking about no later than the middle of January because there's a countback happening. So we're just going to have to wait and see where it settles.
Yeah, it'll be interesting actually. And obviously I'm a big advocate for the 50-50 split, as you well gathered. And I know that there's some great work going on in local government Victoria. When I was there, we started some work and looking at the 50-50 split for the next election, particularly for numbers of councillors, having that gender split. So I think, we're moving towards it, and that's a great thing, that tiny steps each time, and it looks like it has improved on last year. I know that LGV team will be looking really closely at what's happening and what's happened at this mayoral election to see how that split has shifted. So
yes,
it's good news.
I think the state, Victoria's been leading the country in that respect, although it does appear there's been big leaps forward in South Australia and Tasmania in their most recent elections. I don't have the exact numbers. Certainly better than at the council CEO level, Julie, where it's still about 33% women CEOs. That's sort of been a bit stubborn to budge in recent years.
Yeah, and look, there's some really, really fantastic female CEOs that are obviously playing a role in trying to encourage females in higher positions in local government to step up and try and think about their career as a CEO. So, and obviously with my coaching and mentoring, I'm trying to help in that space as well, trying to shift the balance. But, we can only do what we can do. We can only just try and inspire more women to take the step.
Very true. All right, Julie, let's move on to some other news items and just quickly whip through these. And if you've got some thoughts, by all means, throw them in. I did want to mention the passing of a former mayor and councillor at Moynes Shire in Mick Wolfe, who recently passed away. His funeral was held earlier this week, I think, and the flags were flying half-mast in Moyne. The former mayor, Mick Wolfe, served until the last election, actually, 2020, had been on the council, I think, for 11 years and had 2 terms as mayor. So he'll be sadly missed.
Oh, yes. And look, I believe that he was instrumental in being the founding member of the Port Fairy Marine Rescue Service down there.
Wow.
Yeah, and sat on the Port Fairy board. So he had a huge contribution towards the local area down at Port Fairy. So, yeah, I'm sure he's going to be missed in many, many ways.
Absolutely. Great news out of Glen Ira. So we like to highlight some innovations when they pop up. A lot of councils use Snap Send Solve. A lot of people would be aware of that app for reporting issues that you see as you're moving around communities that get logged with the relevant council. Glen Ira and Snap Send Solve have introduced QR codes, which means that people, and of course everyone knows QR codes now after COVID, they didn't necessarily a couple of years ago. It means you don't actually have to download the app. You can just scan the QR code, follow the link, and report an issue which will be much quicker. Great to see this sort of innovation happening, Julie.
Oh, Chris, it just brings me joy to see these kind of things that bring efficiencies and create this quicker turnaround time for the community. I've got to say, I can share a story that walking in my parks in Kingston,
Yes.
and they've got them on the bins at Kingston as well. So look, it's taking off. I think it's a great initiative, and I think it's just really demonstrates modern local government.
I'm glad you mentioned the Kingston one, because I do recall that from the MAV Technology Awards that I was privileged enough to be part of the judging panel this year. And that was one of the very highly regarded entries, those QR codes around the municipality, parks, bins, etc. The difference here, I think, is the link through to Snap, Send, Solve. So, there's more than one way to tackle these problems, but QR codes looks like being part of the future solutions wherever we go. All right, up in Queensland, Sharon Kelsey, who's known to many in Victoria as a former CEO at Glenelg, if I recall correctly. You might recall, Julie, Sharon went up there as the CEO of Logan. That ended badly. There was an unfair dismissal case that Sharon lost and had costs awarded against her. And I remember the estimates of those costs could have run into the millions. She appealed that cost ruling, was denied the right to appeal, but now has won that right to appeal because the decision was overturned just about this time last week. And even a decision, I believe, that the Logan Council and the former councillors meet the costs of that appeal. So that story's still going on. I don't believe the unfair dismissal is at question anymore, but the issue of costs appears to be.
That's interesting, Chris. It's one really to watch, and I'm sure that local governments probably across Australia are watching that one.
I think you're right, actually. Often these things sort of set some sort of precedent, don't they, that we need to take note of. As the Warrnambool CEO issue a year or two back certainly did.
Yeah.
The big news out of New South Wales this week is the local government minister there, Wendy Tuckerman, has referred allegations of impropriety at Canterbury Bankstown Council to a parliamentary inquiry. And Julie, there's going to be public hearings on this in the week of the 12th of December. So this is something that tends to happen in New South Wales, where you can tune in and hear all the evidence being given on these matters. Not a great look for councils to be taken to this level in terms of inquiry.
Right. So anybody can tune in and watch those then, Chris, is that right?
I believe they're public hearings. So yes,
Right,
so
yeah,
I'm assuming it'll be like an ICAC proceeding. It's a parliamentary inquiry. So the minister's terms of reference were released this week. They're quite short. They're basically referring the allegations of impropriety to be investigated by this parliamentary committee. And it also relates back to the former Bankstown City Council, because, of course, Canterbury Bankstown is one of the merged councils from recent years. So we'll be watching that one with great interest.
That's one that I'm going to watch, Chris. I think there's so many cases like this that we can learn from.
While we're in New South Wales, just want to note, number of councils, they've had a rate peg for quite some time, longer than Victoria's had rate capping. There's a number of councils now saying their financial sustainability is seriously at risk. I don't think the natural disasters we've had the past few years have helped in any way, shape or form. Couple to have a look at if you're interested to see how councils are trying to deal with this problem. Armidale has decided to apply for a 50% rate rise over 3 years, which is significant. But Queanbeyan and Palerang has put some options to the community, one of which, let me see if I get these scenarios right, Julie, one of which is no change to services, maintain them as they are, but increase rates over 3 years by a total of 97%. Which is massive in anyone's language, or a couple of options where services get cut, reduced, removed, etc., in tandem with smaller rate rises, but they're still pretty significant in the overall scheme of things. Of course, they have to make application for these to the IPART, which is the tribunal that determines such matters. But they're worrying signs, I think, for the sustainability of the sector to hear those sorts of plans being discussed.
I know, Chris, and I think you've got that pretty much spot on from what I read as well. I don't think I ever remember in my career of any kind of rate rise of that significance. Do you remember anything like that?
No, I think they're pretty, well, certainly in my time, they're pretty unprecedented if they go through. And they're not the only councils talking about these sorts of drastic solutions. Julie, I've been contacted by a Metropolitan Mayor in Victoria for a conversation that hopefully will be coming to the roundup in the not too distant future, just about this big issue that's starting to bite on councils in a rate-capped environment with natural disasters, with the impact of COVID, supply chains, prices, contractor availability, all of these things. It's like a perfect storm that's coming and impacting on the sector. And some people are saying, rightly, we need to have a conversation about how we do this differently.
I know, Chris. And look, there's the other side of the equation as well about how can councils raise revenue is really the multi-million dollar question. Yes. I've been talking, I went in and talked to one of the executives of one of the metro councils recently and talked about the opportunities for revenue raising into the future. You know, there's pretty limited opportunities for local government in that revenue raising space, but there are some things that can be done. And it's interesting, I think that there's a very, very clear message coming out of the government previously when I was in the government, very clear message about thinking about shared services and about how we might work more efficiently as local government. So I think that's really important to think the other side of the equation. How can we also raise revenue? And I know that there are some bits of work going on around Victoria. Rural Councils Victoria are doing some work in that space at the moment to have a look at what kind of revenue raising opportunities could be available. So look, it's an interesting space on both sides of the equation.
Interested in your view, do you think shared services as a concept has become an unhelpful term? Because I see a lot of rolling of eyes now when that term comes up, because it's been talked about for so long and it's never really been successful in any consistent and broad way, has it?
I think you're right, Chris. I think people are tired of hearing those words now because it's been spoken about for such a long time, as you say. So I think it needs a different type of approach towards it. But I think there's no doubt that we need to look at ways in which councils can work together more. And it's really hard work to get together and to work through trying to make things work together and have all those synergies all lined up. So I can understand the complexity and the difficulties with local government around that, but I think it's something that they definitely need to have on their radar. And I know there are some councils that are co-joining, that have got some grants that are co-joining and looking at ways in which they can, I suppose, share services around, say, information technology. You know, it'll be interesting to watch those cases and see if they actually are a success.
One of the dangers that occurs to me, Julie, and I'm playing devil's advocate here and being deliberately a bit provocative, but when we have these sorts of conversations, inevitably the issue of what is the right number of councils comes into the discussion. Does there need to be further amalgamation? Or, you know, the other side of that coin is, did it go too far and does it need to be unpacked somehow? Do you think there's an appetite for that discussion at this juncture?
Are you talking about the amalgamation discussion? Are you talking
about
I am. Discussion around that? Is it the capital A amalgamation? Oh, look, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen in that space. I think my thoughts are if councils don't demonstrate some kind of shared servicing and look at ways to increase their revenue, then there could be a space that is filled by amalgamations into the future. Not that it was ever discussed in the time that I was in state government, but I think that councils need to be really cognizant of that and be thinking about how they can improve their efficiency and how they can maybe share some and demonstrate that it's possible. And amalgamations really needs to be the last resort.
Yeah, it's good to hear you say it was never discussed in your time, because we have consistently heard in recent years there's no appetite politically to go down that path. But we know things change, and there's a whole range of unprecedented impacts happening on the sector. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that back on the agenda, at least as part of a discussion at the start of a new political cycle. So let's wait and see. Talking about structures, I did note in the minutes of the Wodonga City Council meeting recently that they're looking to use this electoral structure review process. There's 39 councils going to be reviewed before the next election to try and keep the unsubdivided structure there. They're not convinced single wards is the way to go, single member wards. So they're proposing that the authority in this case, which I assume is the VEC or a body set up that's operated by the VEC, consult the community on what they want to see in terms of wards.
Yeah, and it is the VEC, Chris. I'm pretty sure that they are responsible for that. Actually, I went back. I'm not normally a person who goes back and looks at all the figures in detail, but I went back and had a look at what I thought the situation was as of around about 2020. And I think that at that time there were about 22 councils that were unsubdivided. There were 15 councils that had multi-member wards. We had about 24 councils with mixed councillor wards and 16 councils with single councillor wards. So that's where we ended up with that split, I think, at the end of the last election. And I know the VEC have been talking about doing further work to change that. So
well, of course, the issue now, isn't it? Sorry to jump in, but the issue now is that the legislation has as a default position single member wards, doesn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And that is the desire of the government, to have single member wards. So that's what the VEC will be working towards, I believe. Anyway.
Yeah, unless there's some sort of strong argument or case put forward as to why that shouldn't be, which my understanding was really only going to be entertained in the case of those small rural sort of shires that perhaps it just didn't make sense to have single member wards. But as you say, we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. Now, you picked up out of New South Wales the passing of a very long time public servant, Julie.
Yeah, that's right. Georges River Council acknowledged the passing of the former general manager of Hurstville City Council, Howard Wallace, and recognise his exceptional public service over 3 decades, Chris.
Wow, yeah.
So very sad to hear that. Always sad to hear those stories.
It is, and we send our thoughts obviously out. We've had some dealings with Georges River through some of the VLGA activities over the past year or so. So we send our best wishes, and thank you for picking up on that. I'd missed that story, Julie. So I've gotten to the end of my list, other than wanting to give a bit of a plug for last night's panel in just a moment. Anything else that you wanted to raise in your guest host appearance here this week with us, Julie?
Oh, so many opportunities, Chris. I could talk forever, as you know, but anyway. But no, look, it's been great talking with you today. I'm really excited about what the future is in local government. There's lots of challenges coming forward and lots of opportunities. I think we've got to just keep having these discussions about, what next and what we need to focus on. I think that you made a point early on about we're halfway through the term in Victorian councils. And so we've now got to a point where we've got 2 years to go. There's a lot to be probably delivered. How are those relationships going, Chris? That's what I want to know. We've had a lot of time online. People are back now. Councillors are back working together. How are those relationships going? How's the governance going? Are the behaviours where they need to be? Does there need to be a refresh around the values, etc.? Something I think that's just on my radar at the moment.
I think that's a really, really good point to raise, because in my experience, since we've had the 4-year terms, it's really that last year where people get tired, they get a bit ratty, if I can use that term. If there's any chinks in the armour, they get exposed in that last year. And, we're talking about being halfway through the term. Really, and we've certainly had this discussion at the City of Whittlesea, the next year is where you really want to get the runs on the board, because once you get into 2024 and it's election year, people's minds, obviously, elected representatives, their minds turn to the election at the end of the year, and it comes up pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Mm.
So you want to, as you say, get the runs on the board as soon as you can in delivering those council plan objectives that you're obviously focused on doing.
And just checking in the alignment between the organisation and the councillors, just doing that check-in to make sure that you're both aligned about what is priority for delivery next year. Really important, Chris.
All right, Julie, before we wrap up, I just do want to mention last night we had our last global executive panel for the year with VLGA and LGIU in partnership. It was an opportunity to hear from the leaders at some rural and coastal shires, Julie, about their issues, and it was just fascinating. We had an Ireland and Scotland CEO. We had John Baker from Mornington Peninsula, and I had no idea Mornington Peninsula, because I'd never thought about it, has 10% of Victoria's coastline just in their municipality. When you look at the map, it makes perfect sense, and it's of course just never thought about it.
And John's got some amazing experience, hasn't he? From
absolutely, and yes, and he spoke very, very well last night about how they're approaching all of those sort of coastal land management issues. But we had Sabina Rahman-Horstman from the city of Coburn in Western Australia talking about their Australian first fringing reef project, which is all about dealing with beach erosion, etc., and improving the environment. And they've had some evidence of increasing fish species, etc., through this project that they're doing, which has been closely monitored. Just fascinating stuff if you're at all interested in how coastal councils in particular are dealing with some of these issues and some of the innovation that's coming. If you're a VLGA or LGIU member, you'll be able to watch that back very soon on the VLGA Connect channel, and I recommend it to you. And send out again my thanks to all those participants last night who were just excellent.
These are great forums, Chris. It's great work by the VLGA, I've got to say. Really opens up your eyes to what's going on in a diverse way in local government.
Sure does. Nicely said. Thank you, Julie, and thank you for being my guest co-host this week. I reckon you've done pretty well. That I reckon we could put an open invitation to you to come back. Would you like to do that? Excellent.
I'd love to. Anytime, Chris.
Excellent. All right. We will call on you again. I thank you for your insights. We've gotten through quite a bit of news there this week. That just leaves me to, other than thanking Julie once more, thanking Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for being our sponsors of the Governance Update from VLGA Connect, and to thank you for continuing to watch and to listen. We'll be back with you again very soon. Bye for now.